Smoking a Dutch in this video once again. Everyone that Joe Biden is encompassing himself around, surrounding himself with, they're all products of the deep state. So my whole theory on the next 4 years is Biden, like I said, he's already loading his cabinet with the deep state right now as I speak. When you bring people like John Kerry back just as a climate advisor or secretary, and you expect him to merely be in that position for the whole entire term, you're sadly mistaken. Presidents shift around their cabinet within 2 to 3 years. That's the time frame that they usually do it in, just to keep fresh voices and fresh ears around them. So I believe Kerry will go back to being the Secretary of State, or at least a national security advisor at the very least, at some point during Joe Biden's term. I expect that. John Kerry is one of the biggest proponents of the deep state. He served under Obama as the Secretary of State, got us into the Paris Climate Accord, which did help us in terms of a foreign policy sense. Our troops were still over there in Afghanistan and Iraq. In fact, in many ways, the Obama administration advanced war just through a modern sense. So these are the type of people that Joe Biden are already surrounding himself with. He's already putting them in his cabinet. Here's a sense of Joe Biden's foreign policy. Here's a sense of what he would do at a time of crisis abroad and overseas.
Contrary to what some in my party might think, Iraq was a problem that had to be dealt with.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
We thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't. But
we should voted for a war and kill thousands of our brothers and sisters. Countless Iraqis. You enabled that war. You also gave a medal to the man who enabled that war and caused that war. Your blood is on your hands as well. And you're disqualified. You're disqualified. My friends are dead.
So is my son, which is Iraq. Okay? For years. That doesn't matter, right? You don't think it matters to you. It matters a lot to you.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does.
Okay.
And I'm not going after your son.
Okay. You better not.
I'm not. No, I'm not going after your son. You were disqualified, sir. Disqualified. The blood is on your hands. Blood is on your hands. No. My brothers and sisters died in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he enabled that to happen. He enabled that to happen. He is disqualified. He is disqualified. No way he can be president. They are dead. Millions are dead in Iraq. He will not be allowed to be president. Disqualified. Trump is more anti-war than Joe.
I think you and I believe, and many of us believe here, as long as Saddam's at the helm, there is no reasonable prospect you or any other inspector is ever going to be able to guarantee that we have rooted out, root and branch, the entirety of Saddam's program relative to weapons of mass destruction. And you and I both know, and all of us here really know, and it's the thing we have to face, that the only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein is we're going to end up having to start it alone, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert, taking taking Saddam down. You know it.
The reason I voted the way I did was to try to prevent a war from happening because, remember, the threat was to go to war. The argument was because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So he said that I need to be able to get the Security Council to agree to send in inspectors to put pressure on Saddam to find out whether or not he's producing nuclear weapons. And at the time, I said, that's your reason. All right, I get it. That was the rationale was that's the way to not go to war, because I didn't believe he had those nuclear weapons. I didn't believe he had those weapons of mass destruction. And you may remember the debates we had after that period about when Colin said, anyway. So that was the rationale. What happened was we went in, determined that they hyped what, in fact, was occurring. They didn't. There was no concrete proof of what he was doing, and they still went to war. And the irony of all ironies is the first thing that Barack Obama did when we got elected president and vice president was turn to me and say, end the war. Not a joke. You run the deal to bring out 150,000+ combat troops from Iraq. And I did. And that he wasn't going to go to war, and this was the way to avoid going to war, was, in fact, a mistake. It was a mistake. I've acknowledged that 15 years ago. But the idea that Bernie Sanders...
He would be an invasive president. He would be an interventionist. He would open the floodgates for a deep state foreign policy, inevitably. That's exactly what we're heading down towards, and that's the road we're heading down towards.
The objective is to compel Iraq to destroy its illegal weapons of mass destruction and its programs to develop and produce missiles and more of those weapons. Saddam is dangerous. The world would be a better place without him. But the reason he poses a growing danger to the United States and its allies is that he possesses chemical and biological weapons and is seeking nuclear weapons. And unlike my colleague from West Virginia and Maryland, I do not believe this is a rush to war. I believe it's a march.
In terms of economics, in terms of everyday life for the people, we can push him as much as we can on that, as much as we possibly can. Might get some good stuff, maybe, possibly. But in terms of that foreign policy and the people he's surrounding himself with, folks, this is the swamp. This is the deep state. This is what it looks like at a professional level. These are people who are decades younger than Biden, but believe in the same things that he does on steroids.
And he is popular. The stakes are high, and the need for leadership is great. I wish he'd use some of his stored up popularity to make what I admit is not a very popular case, but I and many others will support him. 9 months ago, I voted with my colleagues to give the President of the United States of America the authority to use force. And I would vote that way again.
And Biden, he's just a former shell of himself. So he's not going to be the actual one doing the bidding, negotiating, and speaking on behalf of our country. See, Donald Trump did bring in outsiders to his cabinet, but the thing is, these were crooked outsiders. These were people that had fucked people in the private sector, like Steve Mnuchin and foreclosing on people's homes in California, in which, by the way, Kamala Harris didn't stop. And not only did she not stop, but she enhanced his behavior in illegally foreclosing on people's homes there in California. So then when Kamala becomes the president, when Biden decides to resign, and they have a big day at the White House and he resigns, he hands this off to Kamala, she's just going to shuffle around the same cabinet. These same folks will still be there, not in the same positions, but just in different areas and places, probably where they really want them to be, in a sense, at that time when they let Harris take over. In terms of the people in the cabinet, in Biden's cabinet now, they'll be shifted in positions to where they really are expertise at in terms of a deep state sense. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share.